Society, culture, and class in America. Live from Long Island's Gold Coast, this is the Melissa Iteld-Jurin Show on Breaking It Down Radio with co-host Frank Mackay.
I'd like to welcome everyone to our weekly edition of the Melissa Iteld-Jurin Show. Always thrilled to be her co-host and co-pilot here. Frank Mackay here, but more importantly, Melissa Iteld-Jurin. You could hear her every week on several different outlets, and you could binge listen to her on SoundCloud and iTunes, and that's the way it goes nowadays. How are you, Melissa?
I'm fine, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing good. Do you binge watch or binge listen?
I did binge watch the Twilight Zone marathon, but you see, that's more exciting than binge listening to me, I think.
I don't know about that. It depends. It depends what you're into and how many times you've seen the Twilight Zone. But I love the Twilight Zone.
Oh, me too. I've seen these episodes over and over again. I haven't seen everything, but I could watch them again and again. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I mean, the only problem is you lose sleep.
Right, right. You lose sleep thinking about everything there, but it really does get an interesting view on things. I think it gets your mind moving too.
Yeah, it does. It does.
I had Ann Serling on my show a couple of times. She's the daughter of Rod Serling, the creator of the Twilight Zone, and it was fascinating to speak to her because I admire her father so much and the show and the other shows that he did. Rod Serling actually did the screenplay for the original Planet of the Apes.
I didn't know.
Did you know that?
I had no idea. What happened to that? Why didn't he go through with it? Why didn't the studio go through with it?
They did. He is the. It wasn't heralded as much as I'm surprised it isn't. But it'll say right in the opening credits, Rod Serling, screenplay by Rod Serling.
I never noticed that. I thought it was the work of a French author.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe the writing was, but the screenplay, he adapted it for screen or whatever, but it just tremendous. He was just a terrific talent. I have 4 children, and I know you have Larry at home, but my 4 children, all of them have had one teacher somewhere along the line that has played a Twilight Zone episode in class. Their English class right now, and my daughter's grade, and she's 12 years old, she's playing different Twilight Zone episodes. Have you ever done that for your class?
I've usually alluded to the Twilight Zone, and then they understand what I mean. No, I haven't played it. I mean, I'll say that this is just like we're in the Twilight Zone here. If something goes wrong, right away we're in the Twilight Zone. No, I haven't, and I don't have a hold of the Twilight Zone TV companion and the entire collection. I don't have that. So I probably should, but no, I've never played it to a class.
Do kids that age, and again, Melissa Iteld-Jurin, if you're just joining us for the first episode and you haven't listened to our previous broadcast, I urge you to go back and check it out. Melissa Iteld-Jurin is a wonderful author, novelist, dancer, educator, a mom, a wife, and a radio show host. Not bad. Anything else in there I forgot? My gosh.
I don't know.
Quite a bit in there.
I don't know. I don't know when it comes to me.
But the name of the book that everyone should know about, and it's a fun look at dating, a smart, fun look at dating. Melissa wrote the book with Sandra Hochman, and it's Dying to Get Under the Chuppah, a young woman's journey to finding her beshert. And it's wonderful, and Melissa's wonderful. Last week we spoke about online dating, and maybe this week we can get into something a little more serious, and a little, not that dating's not serious. It could be serious, but let me mention something to the audience that we've talked about offline. In my other world, I have political position, and I remember when they were attempting to get David Paterson, Governor David Paterson, out of the governorship, and that's when Andrew Cuomo wanted to come in. Now, David Paterson, who went to law school and did very well in law school.
Went to Columbia Law School.
That's right. He went to Columbia Law School, which Ivy League, right? You can't do much better than that.
Yep.
And David Paterson for all the lampooning they did to him on Twilight Zone or whatever, he's a brilliant guy. I mean, he is. I know him.
Yeah, on Saturday Night Live, I believe. Yeah, they did on the Weekend Update. They poked fun at him. I don't remember who portrayed him, but they made him into I don't know, a cross between a doofus and a slime bucket, and I felt bad for the guy, but he took it in stride. He really did. I thought he was a nice person.
He is a nice person, but he's a brilliant guy also, and a lot of people don't realize this. But keep this in mind. Keep this in mind, that when I started asking around, like, why can't they move him to a judgeship if he, like to be a judge or whatever, it came back to me, and from a very high power, that, and I never knew this, and we just talked about this, that he did not pass the bar.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Now, you know why, maybe you could explain why we talked about the fact that he didn't pass the bar. You know, just from our previous conversation.
Well, they didn't have computer-assisted test-taking equipment back then.
Right. And David Patterson, for those who don't know, is the former lieutenant governor, became governor when Spitzer had his scandal, and he became governor, and he took over, real mess and whatever. But again, he wasn't right. He wasn't expecting to be governor, but it came out later on that he's actually not a licensed lawyer, and he's not. And I don't know that it has come out. You might be hearing it for the first time on the Melissa.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a radio show after that.
Yep.
On WOR.
Yes, that's right. And on this radio show, we might be the first to talk about this, actually, but David Patterson, because of the lack of special needs materials, and as you called it, assisted technology for taking the bar, he never, I don't know that he ever took it, but he never passed the bar. It wasn't in Braille back then. No, he doesn't read Braille. That's the thing. He doesn't
read Braille, but he is legally blind.
Yes. And see, this to me is a very important subject, and I was going to say serious subject, but serious and important. And you're in education, and you're the mom of a special needs child, and you know a lot about this issue. What is it? What is it that we need to do as a society to get a better handle? And again, we've spoke about this in the past, and we've spoke about money, but to get a better handle on helping the parents of special need children and to help educate special needs children. What is it?
Well, it has to start. It has to start on a couple of levels. First of all, there has to be awareness, and I think there is awareness because more and more schools are offering assistive technology. And assistive technology, when we think of that, when we hear that, we think of computers. It is predominantly computer-based. It can also be, and it just occurred to me, it can also be a visual aid, anything to help someone who can't see, who can't otherwise communicate, overcome those barriers and communicate so that everyone can understand. So, for example, for the blind, Braille is one thing. Braille was the first thing, but I can imagine it would be daunting to put a bar exam in Braille. But today they have computer programs that make the letters very large, that adjust the color, that will have audio. There's so much that they can do, and it is expensive. And I no doubt when David Patterson was taking his bar exam, that wasn't available. There wasn't that much awareness. I mean, people knew about visually impaired individuals, but I don't think a lot was going on at that time. And today there is more and more of that because you have a wide range of disabled learners who need assistance, and you have the computerized programs for the hearing impaired, for the visually impaired, and then you have computer programs that help nonverbal children and adults communicate, and it can be as elaborate as a computer program on a smart board. It can be as simple as a book called a picture exchange system, or PEX, which is what my son has in school, where there are icons that are generated from the computer that look very nice and are laminated, and he would take out a picture that or with a word that represents what he wants. It might help if he has to say the word, he can put it in a sentence. That way, everybody knows what he wants. And for children, it can also be done with a reward system. So every time the child can correctly completes a task or request, he earns a token toward a classroom privilege, for example. But PECS is one of the basic systems. It doesn't require that you have a sophisticated computer program. It's just one of the many portable methods. So yeah, there's much more today than there was decades ago, maybe even 30 years ago.
Let me remind folks that just may be tuning in or turning on their radio or their computer that this is Frank Mackay, but more importantly, I am the co-pilot and the co-host of the Melissa Iteld-Jurin show, and I am on with Melissa. She is the author of Dying to Get Under the Chuppah, A Young Woman's Journey to Finding Her B'Shared. We'll explain that even more a little later. She's an author, dancer, educator, mom. And today we're talking about special needs education and special needs parenting, quite frankly. And you mentioned over the last 30 years. I mean, do you think that's when they turn the corner somewhere in this past, let's say, 15, 20 years on special needs? Because that sounds terrific. PES sounds terrific.
Yeah, a lot has been done. I mean, if you were a special needs student back in the 70s, especially if you were autistic, good luck trying to find any help. It's really tough. I mean, there were schools for the blind. There were some schools that were founders of blind education that are still around. There are, the Lighthouse is a very famous resource. But today things are more out in the open because there's more acceptance and there's more attention paid to that, and parents are more vocal, and it's with anything else. Times have changed, and people are empowered to do something. And we've come a long way in that respect. So it's good to be. I know it's not great, but it's good to be a student with special needs now because so much more can be done, and the future looks a lot brighter.
Well, it's terrific. I think part of that is awareness and us becoming more enlightened as a society. Can you imagine what people at the turn of the 20th century? Gosh, what they had to do, 19th century going into the 20th century, wow, what they would have had to deal with. And I know there were protests and there were all types of movements towards, and you never hear about these movements. These aren't movements that you necessarily hear about, but somewhere we grew up as a society, and we still have more to go. We still have more to go. And you mentioned the 1970s. That's the dark ages when it comes to special needs. I don't think the word autistic was being used in 1970s.
Well, they knew they had the word, they just didn't know what to do with it, and they didn't know how to approach it. And going back even farther to the 50s, autism was attributed to so-called refrigerator mothers who, not fathers, mothers who were cold and neglectful. Oh my God. That is so antiquated.
Wow.
It's
Really?
Sexist and yes.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine that? That's
and this was coming not just from the public. This was coming from so-called authorities on child psychology.
Wow. I just think about the 50s and I mean, you talk about the dark ages in the 70s, the movements, hopefully the positive movements and the hippie generation, certainly they got rid of those type of thoughts. But wow, do you imagine blaming a mother for a child's autism? And it's more difficult enough for a parent to deal with to deal with all the extra work that goes along with raising an autistic child or blind child or deaf child. but to give them that extra burden of guilt, just disgraceful. Wow.
I know, it's unconscionable. It was awful. And that was the mentality back then.
Yeah, I don't know how we let people get away with it that long, and let society. It was a man's world back then, and now, I mean, it's still in many ways a man's world, unfortunately, and I don't say that with any pride. It's nothing that we've done to earn that, but for somehow it is easier there on men than it is on women for whatever reason, and it's just unjustified, and it shouldn't be there. Do you see any scent of that, or any sense of that still out there? Is there still anything that they're trying to blame the mother on when it comes to having a special needs child or having a pregnancy that didn't go? Now, I understand smoking. If a mother smokes, or drinks, or does some kind of drug, I understand, that being pointed at or whatever. But I mean, this refrigerated cold mother. Wow, that's just amazing.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, you still run into people who will blame not just the mother, but they'll blame the father for poor parenting, and they feel, even though they see that there may be something wrong with the child, it's still the parents' fault. They're never doing enough. And then people who are aware of what's going on, and understand that the child isn't typical. Well, go ahead and blame the parents. Oh, you're derelict in your duties. You're this, you're that. I mean, the poor parent is so bogged down, is so emotionally and physically drained that he's practically depressed, and all he gets is not a helping hand, but a kick to the ground,
which doesn't help the child at all, right? You want
it doesn't help the parent. The parent is demoralized as it is.
Yeah, and if we demoralize the parents are in charge of raising the child who needs that special help and so forth, and to somehow kick them down. Again, thank God that we're in the area that we are, where we're more enlightened, but we need more of it. I mean, the 50s, that's way out of hand. Like in the 70s, I called it the dark ages when it comes to special needs, but I mean, compared to the 50s, the 70s is it's the Enlightenment.
No, the 70s, everything was going all over the place.
Yeah, let me remind people, this is the Melissa Iteld-Jurin Show. You could hear us once a week, or you could binge listen to us on SoundCloud and iTunes and a bunch of other places, and Blog Talk Radio, and you could certainly find it all over the web. Frank Mackay here, co-piloting the Melissa Iteld-Jurin Show, and I'm very proud to do that.
Oh, I think you're doing more than co-piloting.
No, listen, it's always a partnership whenever you're doing radio together, but I learn more from you than any individual around. You have so much knowledge, and I certainly appreciate that. I'm going to remind people what the book means, right? And again, this is be a little more lighthearted here. The Dying to Get Under the Chuppah. The chuppah is the canopy, and I know this from Melissa, right? The canopy that the bride and the groom stand under in a Jewish wedding with the rabbi, and a young woman's journey to finding her beshert is chosen one or intended one, and that's soulmate or something along those lines. And it's a funny look at dating. And I know I've asked you this before, but you have a lot of good advice, serious advice on dating. Any plans on including that in an upcoming book? In addition to the premise of the novel, or something, take it to a different. I thought maybe take it to a different. I mean, even what we've spoken about here, I think you've given tremendous advice, very serious advice on it. Well, that's something we should talk about in the future. But do you have any plans to write another book?
In a similar vein, not at the moment. I mean, I'm open to anything. If some other plot twist comes along, I would be open to exploring that.
Yeah, it's a it's a calling in some sense, and you do it very well. You know how to explain yourself. You know how to educate, and you know how to write beautifully. To combine those things, to combine those traits and skills, is a nice situation. To you, is teaching a creative field, or can it be a creative endeavor?
Well, it can be if you have the right audience and you know what to do with your material. Sometimes it's a real crazy adventure because you're spending your time with other things outside the classroom, or things other than what you want to be doing in the classroom, such as behavior issues or even school politics. So it can be a mixed bag, and sometimes it can be very stressful. And your work does not end when the dismissal comes. It usually can take it home. It continues with you. So you don't you just can't really wipe your hands of it. It just doesn't work that way.
Well, for the most part, we've been speaking about special needs ed and special needs parenting today, and it's a very serious subject. And I promise we'll be speaking more about that. And if you're the parent of a special needs child, I mean, what can you say then? Give a little bit of encouragement to them, Melissa, because you go through it yourself as a parent, as an educator. What can you give them as encouragement in closing here?
Well, don't get down on yourself. Don't blame yourself. It's very easy to do that. Don't think, well, somebody up there didn't like me. It's very easy to fall into that trap. You're not alone. There are resources. It takes some legwork to get the resources. But if your school district definitely would have some help, will give you ideas of where to go, who to contact. Insurance companies now accept claims for therapy for autistic children. I mean, they're required by state law to accept those claims. So a lot of things have changed, and they're going to continue to change. And of course, it helps when your own family is behind you. If you have a family that doesn't want to have anything to do with you, that says, oh, we can't stand the noise, and your child, and well, these people are just, I mean, I understand they don't want their lives disrupted, but they just want to distance themselves from you, and that's not good. That's not right. So you need to have supportive people around you, and most of all, you need to if you're the parent, you need to have some time to yourself, and that's the beauty of school, that the children go away, and even if you're going to your job, you're able to carve out some personal time, because you need that. It's a mental break.
Yeah, well, that's terrific. That's great advice coming from someone who knows it. And, anybody, just to add my 2 cents, anybody who doesn't want to be around the noise and everything, let them go. You got enough to worry about than worrying
right.
about pleasing everyone. Melissa Iteld-Jurin on the Melissa Iteld-Jurin Show. Thanks once again for all the information here, Melissa.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, Frank.
Melissa Iteld-Jurin is the host, and I am proud to be the co-host and the co-pilot of this wonderful show. We're touching on a lot of important issues. We will see you next week on the Melissa Iteld-Jurin Show.